Hey, it's James here, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about why I still plan on purchasing Bitcoin even though I'm a Bitcoin skeptic. I don't have to love an asset in order to make money off of that asset. And this is what separates a real trader from somebody who is falling victim to FOMO and falling victim to the hype and all these other things. And it's not just with Bitcoin. I saw the same thing with many different assets. We saw it with meme coins, we saw it with the meme stocks, all this stuff. But you can make a lot of money with an asset and think the asset itself is garbage. Now, I don't think Bitcoin is necessarily garbage, but I also don't think it's everything the gurus make you think it is. So taking a look at this graphic as an example, I briefly mentioned this in a previous video. Let's just say hypothetically that there is a horrific bear market in equities and that Bitcoin crashes down to $5,000. I'm just using this as an edge case. Most retail at that level will not buy Bitcoin. Even the most adamant Bitcoin bulls will give up and throw in the towel because in their mind it will have failed and they'll be terrified. And most of them will be looking to sell their Bitcoin versus buying more, which is how that capitulation event could unfold. But the thing is a mistake that I made early on, and I think a mistake that a lot of people make, is they look at these prices and it becomes a binary thought process. It becomes either Bitcoin is going to zero or it's going to a new all-time high. And so if you think about it like that, it's really easy to make a bad decision. And this is the same thing that happened to me in 2020. I had accurately predicted that drop to 4,000 almost a year in advance. But in the moment, I actually went into Kraken where I had these orders sitting for 12 months and I canceled the orders literally minutes before they filled because I was terrified. Had that order filled, it would have ended up netting me $1 million plus. But I canceled it because in the heat of the moment, with the panic and the emotions running high, with COVID in full bloom, all these things going on, my thought process is this may not take out the all-time high, which at that point was $20,000. And of course, in hindsight, that sounds silly, but again, we didn't know that the government was going to come in and do stimulus checks and, quantitative easing at the level they did and all these things that happened. So at the time I was like panicked, but I shouldn't have been, because the real bet was not, will Bitcoin make a new all-time high or go to zero? The real bet was, will Bitcoin be worth more in the future than it's worth today? And so if I had just let those orders filled, the bet that I was actually making was that it would go up above 4,000, even if it only went to say 10,000 and then failed and ended up melting down from there. If it just had a dead cat bounce, I still could have more than doubled my money. And I think it's important to understand that, because just using this graphic as an example, let's say that all these levels fill, okay? And let's just say it's using a $100,000 portfolio as an example. So it'd be a $1,000, $2,000, $3,500, $5,000 invested, 0.3 Bitcoin total, and that will give a cost average of 92.67. So the real bet here is not, will Bitcoin go up past $126,000 in the future? The real bet is, will Bitcoin be worth more than 9,200 in the future? And so if we go down a little further, we can see here's a table that I had AI make. Let's say that Bitcoin only went to 10,000 and it just stopped there. That would still be a small profit, right? If it only went to 20,000, still more than doubling the money. If it had a dead cat bounce, say all the way up to 50,000 on the macro level, and then that was the new high and it failed from there, that's still more than a 5x return. If it goes to 100,000, which I think is likely in the future, I think even if it's a bear case, I think it will retest 100,000 in the future at some point. That is a 10x return. And of course, if it goes higher, then we start talking about 26 and 53 and 100x type of returns. So the bet that I'm, essentially talking about making for myself, again, it's not about, is it going to 1 million? It's simply about, if all these levels hit, do I think it will be worth more than that in the future? And I think the likelihood that it stays under 10,000, at least in the near term, like by near term, I mean like the next 5 or 10 years, I think that's just incredibly small likelihood that that's going to happen. Even if it dips down to those levels, I think it will be temporary. Now, if we go out long term, like 15, 20 years, do I think Bitcoin can fail? I think it can fail. I think it will fail. I think long term, I do not think Bitcoin is going to succeed. And that has to do with the way the network is secured. It has to do with the mining rewards. It has to do with the fact that by 2040, 99% of all Bitcoin will have been mined. And at that point, unless the price is just ridiculously high, it won't, the miners won't be able to justify the cost of mining Bitcoin, in which case the network itself could actually collapse. So long term, I do not think Bitcoin works. I think the energy that it uses and all the other fundamental, factors will cause it to fail. But I don't think it's going to fail in the next 5 years. I think at the very least, after this bear market is over, whenever that may be, however low it may go, my thought process, it will retest at the bare minimum 100,000 in the future, and very possibly could make a new high, even beyond that. So that's my thought process. And I'm sharing this not so that you can copy my plan, you do whatever you want. I'm sharing it because I have very, very few regrets in markets. Most of the time I can go back in hindsight and say, well, I could have done this differently and this would have worked out better. But at the time, given the information I had, that was the right decision. When it comes to that 2020 and canceling those orders, that was the wrong decision. I should have used a smaller size. I definitely should not have done what I was planning on doing, which was buying like 20 Bitcoin. That was too large a percent of my portfolio, based on risk management. But I should have just trimmed that order down, possibly bought like 5 Bitcoin. And that would have been, a fair amount of risk based on my portfolio size. And then, of course, those 5 Bitcoin, uh, during that particular cycle would have been worth, about $250,000. And then, that 250,000, could have taken that, rolled that back in, and so on and so forth. So I just want to share this so that you don't make the same mistakes I made. Make your plan now ahead of time when you're not emotional about it, when you're thinking logically. And if, doo-doo hits the fan, make sure that you are adhering to your plan and not letting your emotional state wreck your judgment, because that's what I did. And obviously it cost me a lot of opportunity cost. If you enjoyed data-driven content, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Please remember that I am just some guy sitting in a spare bedroom, and that means that nothing in this video is financial advice. You should always go out and do your own due diligence and seek out professional financial advice from a licensed financial advisor before making any type of investment in cryptocurrency, the stock market, precious metals, Forex, or any other tradable asset. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And as always, please remember to invest and trade safely.